Welcome back for part two with Alison Mann, where we go over some questions in regards to her own personal hair loss and more about mental health. Hope you enjoy.
Those bull chicks are here to slay. Stop what you're doing, plug in and play. Those bull chicks will make your day. So stop what you're doing and say, those bull chicks.
The next question is in regards to your own hair loss. What was or currently is the hardest hurdle for you to jump when it comes to your hair loss?
Oh, hardest hurdle. Oh, probably confidence was the hardest thing. I've probably talked about this somewhere, I'm sure, but my first breakup was really like the biggest catalyst to me and realizing, oh, I actually have zero self-esteem, mainly rooted from alopecia. And that's like when I started like re-getting into the social media stuff again that I started in high school, but was like kind of really scared of people's opinions and like people finding it and getting bullied. So I stopped, and then I got to college within such an unhealthy relationship, purely out of like, I thought, oh, if I'm in a relationship, that means I can be worthy with hair loss. That means, okay, maybe I can be pretty then because someone else likes me. And when that relationship went badly, that breakup rocked me to the point of like, I was like, oh my God. So I needed someone to like show me that I had worth. And like, that's not okay. Like I to have worth on my own without anyone else. And so that what that really showed me like was really, I was like faking it hard for all those years. Like if someone asked me like if you're felt good about hair loss and you felt confident with it, I would have been like, yeah, of course. Like it's been so long. And until that happened, I was like, oh, wait. I was like, oh no, you don't. I was like, because all the thoughts happen of like no one will ever like me again with hair loss. Like if I don't try to stay in this relationship, and I like we went back and forth a few times in terms of like getting back together and breaking up because I was like, oh, I won't find anyone else. Like I have to make this work because no one else will love me this way. And it really was just me not having the confidence and like steady self-esteem and self-worth that I needed to just know that that wasn't true. Like
I went through the same thing.
Yeah.
It's weird because it was a huge comfort. It was also like, this person knows I have hair loss. So of course, this is the only person that I can be with, because if I were to start dating again, who's going to date me now? You know what I mean? I had that mindset for so long too. And I realized that I stayed in a relationship that was not for me. And I stayed for years because of it. And that's a hard lesson to learn for sure.
I mean, I'm so grateful for it though, because it led me to everything. But I was like, oh wow, everything that I thought I knew about myself and that the confidence I thought I had, that was all not real yet. And that's totally okay. Like sometimes we need an experience like that to figure out like, oh, there's some deeper work that I need to do. And that's totally okay. Sometimes you need that kind of rock bottom moment, figure out what is, being masked like by like defense mechanisms, or like our brain is always trying to do our best to protect us. I always say like symptoms are attempted solutions. Like you need to like take the shame out of like bad versus good coping. Like it's just coping. Your body, we're just trying to cope through. It's hard to realize these things because like our brain is doing a real good job at protecting us from that deeper stuff sometimes. So yeah, confidence, that was a journey, but I'm glad it all happened the way it did, because now I can say I have, I've truly have confidence now.
That's so great. I always think about like alopecia too, as not only was it an experience that I went through, but it taught me a lot that I don't think I would have learned if I didn't have it. So like appreciating good friendships versus bad, like toxic relationships versus non-toxic relationships. I don't think I would have learned those. Well, maybe years later, but now I know who I want to be around. Like, do you appreciate me like I appreciate you? Like there was a lot of friendships I've had in the past, even when I had hair loss, that I kept because I'm like, this person I have to keep, because who's going to want to be friends with the girl that has hair loss? Who's going to want to go out on the weekend with the girl that has to wear a wig and stuff like that? It was a weird trauma bond, not with them, but for my own self. Like I was traumatized and just clinging on to anything and everyone I could. And I've learned so much because of alopecia, and I'm grateful for it too. Absolutely.
Yeah. And that's the beautiful part. And when you get to sort of the end of like when you're reaching acceptance, it's like when you can find all the silver linings and you start being like, wow, like this has made me such a more empathic, understanding human
Yeah.
being that has like more depth to myself than I probably would have had if I had not experienced this. Um,
100%.
and once you can like get to that point, you're kind of on the track of like, all right, that acceptance, it's coming.
Yep. It's almost like you couldn't tell me years ago that I would feel that way. I would have been like, yeah, right. But
Yeah.
it's so true. There was a moment where it happened. I think it honestly was when I found out that there were so many people online I could talk to, where I went, it was a breath of fresh air. And I kind of sat there like, oh my gosh, I finally have people that get it. And it
Mm-hmm.
gives you like a confidence boost knowing that there's people out there rocking their balls and
Mm-hmm.
everything like that, that you're like, oh,
Yeah.
I can do this, you know?
Right. That are married and have good relationships and
Successful careers. Like,
right.
yeah, it's incredible to see people with hair loss striving and doing a million things and all of them just being successful and out there and bald. It's like, oh, okay. Like, even
Right.
though I'm still working through some stuff, it gives me confidence in sitting there and being like, I can do this because there's so many people that have done it before me, you
Yeah.
know? Yeah.
No, exactly. Yeah, because it can get hard to get stuck in like, no one will want to be my friend. I'll never find a relationship. I can't be successful. Like people at work won't like want a bald girl. Like, and to see other people who have those things, it's a good reminder to root us back in reality of like, okay, this is hard. It might cause some bumps, but like I can still have
Yeah.
all those things.
Absolutely. And it's so lovely to watch other people live their lives as themselves, you know, like because we know how hard it is to come out of that shell of hiding. There's still days where I hide, and there's still days where I don't want to, because let's be honest, wigs are the most uncomfortable things ever. And they're so itchy and they're terrible. I went from like in the beginning of my alopecia journey to wearing them, came out about it, told everybody about it, barely wore wigs. I wore beanie sometimes, that I went out in public once, and then there was like a regression I dealt with that I'm still kind of trying to get over and
Mhm.
figure out why it happened, where it kind of came back where it was like I have areata, so it changes all the time. So
Yeah.
when I start losing hair like all the way in the front, I think that's when my regression came back and I was like, oh, gotta wear wigs again because that is prominent for me to see, like the
Mm-hmm.
sides and the back of my head I can't see. Like you have to do like tricks to look at the back of my head and stuff. So I
Yeah.
think with areata, with it changing so much,
Mm-hmm.
that was hard for me, and I was like, oh, time for wigs. Oh, I can get rid of wigs again. So that, yeah, that's wild for me to
Yeah.
experience.
And like sometimes it's not even about like, sometimes not even framing it as a regression. Like if we're allow ourselves to go through these changes without shaming or judging ourselves, that in itself is a huge win and very in line with acceptance. I think sometimes acceptance, which is, when by the time this comes out, the blog post will be up, but my next blog post is about how acceptance, the view of it is so skewed that like sort of what I was mentioning earlier about like needing to be positive all the time to love yourself. And that's not necessarily true. A lot of people think acceptance means that you have to feel positively about alopecia to have accepted it. And that's not the truth.
Right.
The way you accept anything, but same applies for alopecia, is like letting ourselves have the pain because pain is inevitable, but not like letting the meter turn into suffering, which we turns into suffering by sometimes like this resistance that happens, whether it's unconscious or conscious. And there's so many reasons for it, which can be helpful to like work through with a therapist or someone. But truly acceptance is just like allowing the pain to exist, not grasping for control where we don't have control, but also allowing yourself to have bad days without judging ourselves, like
Right.
letting yourself go through the ebbs and flows, right? And so it's totally fine to like go through phases of like, you wear a wig again.
Yeah.
Like, from a therapist perspective, I'd be like, that's great. As long as we're not judging and shaming ourselves, like
Right.
then we know we're like on the right track, right? Because when we start judging and shaming ourselves, that's when we turn that like pain meter into more of like turn it up to more of a suffering side than it is
Yeah.
pain. And so sometimes I'm always talking about that with my clients as well, like allowing pain to exist and the practice of not turning it into suffering becomes, I think, really key with alopecia in the beginning. So hard because you almost
Oh.
to go through that suffering a little bit in the beginning. Like it's impossible not to get stuck in like that kind of like wallowing and like how
Oh
difficult.
yeah.
So like part of it is we need to experience that at first. And then at a certain point, you're like, all right, I got to do something about it. And then that's when we start kind of working on the skills of like, how can I allow this pain to exist without judging myself, without pushing myself over into the edge of suffering and just, allowing things to happen, doing my best to deal, and kind of going through the ebbs and flows, because like there's so much unknown in alopecia, and that's often like the biggest factor in what creates so many of the mental health issues with
Yeah,
it. And almost like getting comfortable with the unknowns is so hard and takes so much practice, but that's kind of what it's all about. So like I don't even think it's not a regression that you wore wigs. Like you're just like going through it, like you're
right.
letting yourself go through the motions of like what feels best at each moment for you, and like, you know, tackling it as it comes, which is what it's all about. Like we can't really predict anything. We kind of got to have to go moment by moment and be mindful in each moment as we're experiencing it.
That's very true. For the longest time, I thought that's so true because I love to feel comfortable. So
Mhm.
where I feel comfortable, I'll enjoy whatever I'm doing way more if I'm comfortable in that environment. And that applies past hair loss. That's just people I'm with, the people I'm
Yeah,
around, etc.
yeah.
So I've noticed that when it comes to my hair loss, if I feel most comfortable in a wig, or if I don't feel like I want people to, because if you wear like a crazy color like red, like this is like two different colors, people are tend to say stuff, oh, I like your hair, and I'm like, do I even want to deal with that? So I'll put on like a very neutral color. You know what I mean? So,
Yeah. And
and
that
I
goes
don't.
to the capacity question too, right?
Yeah,
Like, and like we're allowed, if we don't have the capacity to deal with that, like choosing a different color for that day or wearing a wig or whatever it is, like, and there's no shame in that. And it doesn't mean that you can't have acceptance with that, because we're all swimming in the water of beauty standards and diet
yeah,
culture. We can't get rid of that. We just have to do the best we can within it. And it would be so unreasonable to have these expectations on ourselves that we have to just ignore all that and like not think about it, which is why I say
absolutely.
just like, you know, we can do all these things and do what we need to do to feel comfortable, depending on like what our capacity is to handle it,
Yeah,
build up our skills to tolerate some of the distress. But it doesn't mean that, I think sometimes it's like you have to just go out however you are, not cover anything, and that's how it has to be if you want to have acceptance. And that's not true. Like
right.
you can do whatever we need to do to deal with the day to day. We just want to take the shame and judgment off ourselves, because
Yep,
that's where we start bringing in some more, you know, suffering into the picture, more than we need. More,
absolutely. I think that's a huge aspect, and also really hard for me when I first came into the community. It was like so eye-opening, but I caught myself also comparing, like, oh, I'm not far enough in my journey to be friends with these people, to go out or maybe meet these people in person. Like I'm
yeah.
not far enough in my journey. So that was a weird hurdle for me to get over. I was like, whoa, you can't compare yourself, because
Mm-hmm.
some of the people that you're seeing, that you're talking to online, could have had alopecia 10 years prior to what you got diagnosed with. So they could be way more open and way more honest and authentic and everything. And it's like I had to stop myself from being like, no, you're good. The way,
Right.
like, you can wear wigs, you could do this. It's your
Right.
own life. So
Yeah.
that comparing was like a hard thing for me to get over too.
Right. And that's, you know, a lot of my clients, or just people I talk to, are navigating of like that comparison of like, I don't know what feels authentic to me, because I am viewing it through the lens of like how I see other people. So like, does it
Sure.
have to be bald? Maybe I want to wear, like, it's hard for them to decipher at first like what feels authentic to them, because at first it's a lot of like the comparison, like you're saying, of like, oh, do I have to be like her and just never wear a wig, or like her and like wear wigs just whenever I feel like it? And it's really so individualized, and you're right, it's
Absolutely.
hard not to compare. And
Yeah.
I always like to point out, like, it took me over 15 years. Like, yes, I never wore wigs, but like it still took me 15 plus years to like want to be involved in the community and to like find real acceptance and real
Right.
confidence. And I know I always like to bring it up every so often on my page, because I know people who look at my page now are just think like, oh, she's probably been like this forever. And that's like not true at all. It took such a long
Right.
time. There should be no timeline on it. But you're right, it gets hard to compare. And I think the comparison comes in a lot because people are trying to figure out like what feels true to them. And, you know, the hard part is we don't figure it out until like trial and error process for ourselves of like what feels most comfortable and authentic to us. And we're allowed to have that trial and error process. I feel like we get stuck on needing to get it right on the first try. But I don't know
Oh
anyone
yeah. Yeah,
who's
right.
like no one.
Whoever they are, they're one of those special people, because that's wild.
Right.
I,
I've
I can't imagine being like, all right, yep, I have alopecia. And then just mental health, great.
Right.
Everything's
Like, yeah,
great.
I feel good, balls. Let me just rock it. Like I have not met anyone who's like on the first try to just figure it out, like what feels best for them. I think that's where the comparison gets difficult because there's so
Yeah,
many routes that like acceptance looks like with hair loss. It's not one way, even
right.
though, society or like people might try to paint it that way. It really at its core acceptance is just like allowing the good and bad days without judgment or shame on ourselves, letting
Yep.
go of control of what we don't have control over and taking things as they come in a very mindful way. And other than that, it can look however it wants. Wigs, no wigs, eyebrows, no eyebrows, lashes, no lashes, eyeliner. Like there's so many versions of what it,
Absolutely.
yeah. So you're right. The comparison is hard. And I think
Whew.
that's hard.
Yeah. And it was so weird for me too, because I'm like, I'm comparing myself to people in the community, like that
Right.
have hair loss. And that felt weird to me because I was
Mhm.
so used to before that comparing myself to people that didn't have hair loss.
Yeah.
So that was a weird thing where I'm like, why am I comparing myself to people in the community? Like they're part of my
Hmm.
community. So that was a bizarre thing for me to work through, but here I am. I eventually got over it and I was like, oh, I'll just do what makes me comfortable. So I have a couple more questions for you. Have you faced any challenges in your professional or personal life when it comes to your hair loss? Just because you're a therapist that works with people with hair loss, but have you come across any challenges with that in your profession?
So it's interesting because majority of the time people will know that I don't have hair prior to speaking with me, whether because they saw me through like a referral platform like Psychology Today. And so like they reached out and already saw my photo. So like they already know. Or, if they're coming through a referral from our practice, like we always send them our website link with our stuff, our bios. And so in that regard, not necessarily. I will say that I think it makes me look a lot younger. And so I think in that way, people are always, I get a lot of questions about my age, and I have to be like,
Hmm.
work on through those things and then that work through it myself too, being like, I feel like, it's a blessing and a curse. I'm gonna have a baby face for like most of my life. And
Sure.
I part of that, like I think the lack of hair has like, I don't know, made my skin smoother or
Yeah.
something. I don't know. And also just like I think not the eyebrows, like it just gives me a younger face look. And so in
Yeah,
that
sure.
way, yes, indirectly, employment wise, luckily, no. I think it's mainly because the space I'm in and where I am also in the country, like New York City is like where the practice I work is based out of. And
Sure.
so obviously there, and it's like a practice that specializes in body image, and I
Oh,
the best people ever. And like we have like
yeah.
such a like social justice component of like what we do at our practice, where we like I'll give them a shout out. My body positive home is like our social justice component. Body positive therapy is the name of the practice, but
Okay.
they're so great about talking about inclusivity and body size and body diversity and like all aspects that
I
like
love it.
it ended up being more of an asset than it ever was an issue, me having alopecia. So
That's great.
yeah, I think, part of it is I've just got lucky with the people I've met and been connected with in that way. So thankfully, no, I've not run into issues other than people thinking I'm like a 16-year-old.
Really?
Well, they haven't said that, but
You could feel it. You could sense it.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, not from like clients, but like I have people like in my day-to-day think that I'm a teenager, not like necessarily that in my workplace that people said that to me, but like when people guess my age, like randomly, they'll think I'm like in my teens.
Oh,
So
wow.
that, so it's just funny to me, but I'm like, whatever. And every other aspect of my life that is a benefit minus my work, because obviously I want to be taken seriously and not, so I had to remind people like, trust me, I went through all the schooling and I took all the and I have all like I have
Certifications. I got it all.
I didn't scam my way into my job as a teenager.
You're right.
So yeah, that's really been the only only downside.
What about personally? Any challenges personally? I know you said
Oh,
dating a little bit.
yeah, socially, I've always been someone who's had probably higher social anxiety. And it's an interesting balance because I definitely consider myself like an introverted extrovert, like probably 60% introvert, 40% extrovert. So like in some ways, like I just like my own space. I
Yeah.
need like a full day to myself each week. Like I'm not like a go out type of person, but balancing that also with making sure I'm not isolating myself. And so that has been something that I've had to like learn for myself of like, sometimes it's because I genuinely don't want to. And other
Oh,
times
yeah.
because I am anxious about going into a new space of people that don't know me and wondering like how that is going to be. Are they going to make comments? Are they going to stare? Am I going to be accepted? Will I not be? So that has been a piece that I think that one's a bit ongoing, but at this point, when you get to adulthood, I feel like you have your circle of people that you trust, and so that's good. But in college and high school, that was really difficult for me, feeling left out and not really having a group of friends,
Yeah,
which
I
is
bet.
so important. I like never had a group, and that was probably the hardest part for me in high school, like just having like scattered friends here or there, and then being like,
Right.
what's different about me than everyone else? And why does everyone
Right.
else have a group and not me? And so it's really hard at that age not to like think like, oh, people don't want to be friends with me because I don't have hair, and that's like not cool. So that has been one of the, challenges. Dating wise, I'm at a place where I think it used to be a bigger challenge. And now I'm like, the saying I've been saying to myself is, I want someone just as rare as I am. And
Hmm.
framing it that way has really kind of taken the pressure off of really feeling like I have to blame anything on my hair loss or
Yeah,
whatever thoughts that go through my head. I'm like, no, I'm allowed to take time with this. Like, it doesn't have to be perfect. Like, sure, it's an obstacle. Sure, not some guys are not going to like me because of the sole reason I don't have hair. Like, absolutely. But not everyone. And like, I only need one person to like me this way. I don't need the whole world to like me this way. And so,
absolutely.
however long it takes to find someone who is just as rare as me and who is that match, then
I love that.
yeah. So it's like a challenge, but it's also not in a way. Like, I
Right.
feel like sometimes it's hard not to compare, like, oh, I feel like my friends have more dates or more people liking them. Like, right, that part is difficult, but at the same
Yeah.
time, then I'm like, well, I don't need that many people. Like, when I find that person, like, it will be that person. In
Yep.
some ways, it filters out like going through more shitty people. And
Absolutely. It
yeah,
like you're like, okay, now I know you it almost teaches you what to like red flags of definitely not. People just nope,
right,
not even gonna meet this person.
right.
So that's interesting. When I got out of my last relationship where I was like, wow, I'm definitely in this relationship because of my own stuff and hair loss was being one of them.
Mm-hmm.
I had such a hard time dating my now husband in the
Mm-hmm.
beginning, and I was so distant. I was like, ooh, I just got out of like a 5 year relationship. I don't want to date, even though I was like, oh my God, this guy is great. I'm so in love with him. I said to myself, yeah, but if you fall in love with him and tell him you have hair loss, he's probably not going to love you. So I kept it from him for so long. And
Mm-hmm.
then I don't know. I often go back on this and I'm like, should I have told him right away? Because, like, what if that was in my way, like trapping him to like fall in love with me? And then it was like, oh, just by the way, I got hair loss. I don't want to say that I think about that often, but sometimes it does come up
Mm-hmm.
where I'm like, man, should I have told him right away when we were dating? Or was it smart for me to wait 8 months? I don't know how I did it, but he's honestly shocked of how I hid it from him. But when I did tell him, he was like, oh, okay, it's whatever. And I often think, is it because you knew me so well? It was 8 months of us dating. So there I go, doing the what ifs again.
Yeah, and it's so hard. I have people talk to me about this too, of like, when do I tell them? How do I tell them? And it's
Right.
so individualized because, like, with any other, like, we don't go to someone being like, "Do you have diabetes?" Like,
Right.
like it's like because it's a visible thing, we feel like inclined to like owe people explanations, but it's
Yeah.
hard, like in a way, like we do, and in a way we don't when it comes to dating. Obviously, we want the person we're with to accept that about us because it's part of us, but
Yeah.
not all of us. And so we want them to also be able to see the other parts of us too. And so, I think it's complex, right? To figure out like what the balance is of feeling like you want to tell them because you want them to accept it. And like that's a big piece of knowing if it's your person or not. And also being allowed to keep it to yourself to an extent because you don't really owe anyone
An
anything,
explanation or a reason.
right? Or if you're not comfortable explaining it yet, then you don't have to say anything. So it's definitely is
Right.
a balance. But yeah, it is hard because when it's visible, it's like we feel like we like owe people something. Yeah.
Absolutely. The last question that I have, and then I'm going to ask you also about resources. But the last question I have for you is what is one piece of advice that you would want to give someone new to hair loss or possibly in like a dark point right now, or even like feeling like they're regressing or feeling like they accepted it and then they're going back on that, and kind of like what's going on with me a little bit.
That it's not weak to ask for help. I think there's a weird perception that like hair loss has to be dealt with alone, in secret, because it's told it's just hair, it's just a cosmetic issue, just like get over it. Or like even sometimes people paint it as like some sort of failing of ourselves, like you just ate better, if you just were less stressed, like you could grow your hair back. And so they think it's almost like this like personal thing that like we can't tell people about because there's so much shame around it. All these things are not true. You're allowed to get help. It's not weak. It's really brave to ask for help. So yeah, if you're finding yourself in a spot like that and you're, don't know where to turn, well, I guess that leads into our resources.
There's please, all the resources you have.
Yeah, I mean, so obviously there's my business where I've tried to like load up with as much as possible. I have my free peer support group that meets once per month.
Nice.
Very chill group, meets the first Saturday of each month. It's peer support, not professional support. And yeah, it's just a group of people with hair loss. I have my journals. If you're not feeling ready yet to like really talk to anyone about it, because I know we've all been in that space where we're not ready to meet people yet or communicate. We're just still like in our own space of processing. I have 3 different therapeutic journals. One is hair loss specific, the hair loss diary, and then 2 are general, but they still have therapeutic activities and tools in them, the Authentically You journal and the Perfectly Imperfect journal. And I have like a little quiz on my website that can help you like match you with.
Great. I'll put all of these links in the description too for people to find, because I think you are like you and yourself being an incredible resource for people in the hair loss community. So I will make sure that I like put all of this in regards to people finding a therapist. Obviously, that's a lot. So how would they go about like talking to you about being their therapist if that was an option?
For sure. That is the third resource of my business. Where if you're looking for me to be your therapist, you have to be located in New York. But I also start offering coaching through my business for people with hair loss, and I can work with you for coaching. If you're anywhere in the world, I just say that if you have higher risk mental health concerns, which is also something we can talk about in our intro call, if you're not sure if you're like on that line, coaching is not suitable for high risk concerns like active eating disorders, substance use, psychosis, suicidal ideation. Like if that is at play, you will need like an additional component than just coaching. But obviously I can help with the hair loss piece. So if you're outside of New York and there's like a higher risk concern, you can still work with me as your coach, but we can't. Coaching is not for treating and diagnosing mental illness. For therapy, you can do that. But the benefit of coaching is you can be anywhere and I can work with you. Great. On my website, I have both links to contact me for either therapy or coaching, and I offer free intro calls for both. Yeah, in any of the links that you put, it'll be there. But
I'll have you send me everything that you want to put, because I know you have a bunch of different resources that I probably don't even know about too. But awesome. I think you're great. You're honestly so knowledgeable. And I've also learned a lot from you in regards to working through my own stuff, my day-to-day alopecia and my day-to-day hair loss and my thoughts and everything. You gave a completely different perspective than just a couple of friends on here talking. And I love that professional aspect that you brought to this conversation. So thank you so much.
Oh, I appreciate it. And I feel honored to be one of your final guests here, because you guys have done so much good for this community. And so
thanks.
I hope you guys, I hope you can recognize that too. Like you have been an incredible resource for people with alopecia too. And this podcast has been an incredible thing for our community. So you've done a lot of good, and I hope you can recognize that.
That's gonna make me cry. Thank you so much. I appreciate that so much. I know I remember when Kristen came to me about this, I remember sitting there and being like, man, I'm brand new to alopecia. Like, should I really be one of the people that post this? Because I was so new of talking about it and being public about it. But she's like, yeah, let's do it. And I've had a blast.
It made you that much more relatable and like that much more successful in having people be able to like relate to what you were saying. So I guess it's a good point for like, if you're new in your journey and you're questioning, like, do I have something like valuable to bring to this? Like, is it too early for me to like connect or want to do something about it? No, because like Paige and Kristen were out here like doing the thing.
Right. When we just told people publicly about it. Right. Yeah. That was a big step. I still think about that where I'm like, wow, how did I even do that? That was
Yeah.
so wild. But I think it was also knowing that there were so many people that supported it. And I
Yeah.
knew that there was a community that stood behind us, like everybody that listens every time we post a new episode. And I was sitting there like, this is incredible. I met people that I loved. I've gotten friendships out of it. I've learned so much valuable information in regards to my own mental health. Like you just taught me a million things that I should probably start doing. Like it's incredible when you talk to so many people. There's
Mhm.
so many doors that are opened. So yeah, it's been
Yeah.
great. So thank you so much.
Of course. Yeah. No, thank
Yeah.
you guys. You deserve the last round of applause because you've done so many great things too.
Thank you. And you guys know the end of this, which is so weird that this will be my last like goodbye on this, but thank you again for coming on. And it is so great for you guys to listen. I obviously have an episode going out on February 18th about my final goodbye, but this is the last alopecia episode for guest series. So there's no really like bald peck out or you can contact us because you won't be able to. I mean, you still can, but
Yeah.
yeah. So I mean, I guess until not next time, guys, bald peck out.